Karunalayam Namami Bhagavatpadam Shankaram Lokashankaram Shankaram Shankaracharyam Keshavam Badarayanam Sutrabhashya Kritau Vande Bhagavantau Punah Punaha Ishvaro Gururatmeti Murti Bhedu Vibhagine Vyomavat Dehaya Dakshina Murtaye Namaha Gukarastvandakaro Vai Rukarastvanivartakaha Andhakara Nirodhitvat Gururitya Vidhiyate Sadashiva Samarambham Shankaracharya Madhyamam Asmadacharya Paryantam Vande Guru Paramparam. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahaviryankaravavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvisha Vahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. So I hope the session on the significance of Shivaratri was helpful in celebrating this important function, really for everyone, but particularly for the students of Vedanta. So anyway, that was good. Now we can go back to the topic that we have been touching on, which is the importance and necessity of self-inquiry and the power of self-inquiry. This is what we have been, the equipment necessary for us to complete the journey. So one part is to see where we are going, to find out exactly where we need to go. And the second one is to have all the paraphernalia with us to be able to negotiate this journey. So here we say that in the journey of, reaching the goal of Atmagyanam, the understanding about, a correct understanding about ourselves, and this is said that should be understood that this is in effect the power to negate the effects of anatma in doing atma vichara. So let me repeat it. It may not have really be very clear. So the atma jnanam or self-understanding, self-inquiry or self-knowledge is in effect the power. We talked about the power of the equipping ourselves for the journey. So this consists of, so let's be very clear about this. This is the premise of today's class, and really truthfully the entire spectrum of Vedantic teaching, that the power to do self-inquiry equals the power to negate the effect of wrong inquiry. Wrong inquiry means anatma vichara. So really, if you look at it, we are fully engaged in anatma vichara, engaged in samsara. And the power to do atma vichara is reversing that whole process, and the power to negate the effect of anatma. And so we saw it in the previous classes, the importance of the word vichara. So vichara comes from two combination of two, one's prefix and one the main dhatu. Main dhatu was char or chal, chara, that comes from chal, and vi comes from visheshena, means a very effective, not just going someplace. So we went through this, that moving forward is important if you have to travel someplace. But moving forward with care, with resoluteness, with definiteness, overcoming some problems that might come. This is the special form of chara called vichara. So we saw in one of the classes that we took the difference between tarka and vichara. Really an important thing. I learnt a lot by thinking about this. So tarka is just pure logic. Vichara, on the other hand, is a step-by-step progress, looking at what has been covered, making sure you're going in the right direction, asking people around, and so on. I gave you this experience, and I think that comes to my mind, is that not only the first time I went to the Rishikesh ashram of Swami Dayanandji, where Rishikesh itself was not very well developed at that point, but even afterwards when it was developed, and in fact became a little crowded. And so, you go there after a couple of years and you don't, even more, you don't remember the exact direct, way to get there. From the main highway, which is linking Haridwar to Dehradun, passing through Rishikesh, and which is on the side of the Ganga, you now have to go through some small streets and villages to reach the ashram, which is right on the bank of the Ganga. So this is the logistics of it. Well, I remember that when we would go, um, we will not just be given just a simple, there were no GPS at that time, and I don't know GPS would work with all these non-addresses. It says Purana Jhari. That's it. I don't know if they... Anyway, supposing the GPS was not there, you don't remember all the intricate steps necessary to get there. So what you do is, this is called vichara. This is called making progress slowly but surely. You go to something close to Rishikesh. As soon as you see Rishikesh, and of course there you don't say, welcome to Rishikesh. It doesn't happen in India. Maybe in the big cities, but not in the smaller cities. So as soon as you see a crowded bazaar and you have already been 45 minutes from Haridwar, you think that this might be Rishikesh. So you stop your car, and this has actually happened to me. I went in a taxi, and you stop the car and you say, do you know where the ashram for Swami Dayanandji is? And some of the time the people will not know. Says, sir, I don't know. Please go ahead. Or they might say, oh yeah, I've heard of it. So it's around four or five, about 10 minutes from here. So people talk like that, 10 minutes from here. Approximately. It could be 15, it could be 7, but they just say give you an approximate figure. So then the advice comes in that please do this. There is an Indian Oil petrol station, and right at the petrol station, I think you have to turn right towards the Ganga. But once you go to the petrol station, ask the attendant there, he would know. Good advice, very good advice. Petrol station Indian Oil is easily recognized. So you go there and you ask the attendant. He says, yes. You go to the second stop sign from here. You turn right. And after that you have to go through some streets. But when you get there, please ask the villagers where it is. Very good advice. Step by step. Not sure. He doesn't have it on the back of the hand which says, okay, after the second stop sign, then you go to this. Oh, you don't have that. This is called vichara. So, this is what is necessary for us to do Atma Vichara, exactly like this. Atma Vichara means you have to look at each step, one step at a time, ascertain the effects of it, see if you're making progress, ask of other couple of people, read some books, and they all say, yes, this is what you need to do. What you need to do. So here, we'll progress this in some depth today. So you will see what this means. So Swami Maheshananji, in order to set the stage for this kind of a Atma Vichara, he quotes a verse from Adi Shankara. And so Adi Shankara says, Arudhasya vivekashvam tivra vairagya khadginaha titiksha vartmayuktasya pratiyogina drishyate. So he's talking about a very clear and a very fruitful, highly fruitful result of Atma Vichara. The fruitful result is that this is where we have been leading thousands of lives for this purpose. And the purpose is to gain an independence from samsara. This is the goal. So in saying this goal, Adi Shankara says, let me just repeat it and go through. There are 3 factors that he is pointing out. Let's go through each of the factors. Arudhasya viveka ashvam tivra vairagya khadginaha titiksha vartmayuktasya pratiyogina drishyate. Let's go backwards from there. Pratiyogina drishyate means there is no obstacle for you to achieve this freedom in life. Pratiyogi means a obstacle, a kind of like a road sign which says you can't go any further. There's a policeman standing there, and so this is a kind of like, or you may have a wrong direction that somebody gave you. And so that could be a pratiyogi, whatever. We'll see all of that in our life, in the description of our life very shortly. But he says, pratiyogim na drishyate. There is no obstacles seen for whom, this is an important thing, 3 factors. Arudhasya vivekashvam. Ashvam means a horse. So Viveka Ashvam means the horse of discrimination. So listen to all of this carefully and take notes, because this is a very, very clear instructions by our wise people on how to do Atma Vichara. Really, this is all part of the same topic that we had started on. So, Viveka Ashvam Arudhasya, of a person who has Arudha. Arudha means who has mounted the horse. Who's riding the horse. And riding the horse is a skill. Because when you're riding the horse is not sitting down, that you can easily just sit on top of it and then the horse gets up. Maybe it happens, but most of the time the horse is up to here. How are you going to get on top of the horse? It requires a certain skill. And not only that, but after you have gotten on top of the horse, to stay there while the horse is moving. This is why riding training is not an easy thing to do. Anyway, so 3 factors required for freedom. One is you must learn to mount the horse of Viveka. What does it mean by the horse of Viveka? We will see in a minute. We're just looking at the word meanings yet. This is number one. Then he says, Tivra Vairagyam Khadginaha. Khadgi means a sword of sharp, powerful, sharp sword that you can cut branches or obstructions and so on. You're mounted on the horse and you're equipped with, this is like a battle, really speaking. Life is a battle. So if you're going in a battle, I mean, it's kind of like the new battle now is missiles and counter missiles and all these kinds of things. But if you look at the classical battle at that time, the battle of Mahabharata, you would be on a horse and you would actually be, would have some talwars, some swords and so on with you and other things. The third thing, so that's number two. Trivra Vairagyam Khadginaha. So Khadginaha in the form of Tivra Vairagyam. Tivra Vairagyam means turning away from the unnecessary attractions of the world. Not only unnecessary, but useless. The useless hold of the world, which is grabbing you to keep you in samsara, to be able to have the vairagya in a very tivra form, very sure. Not like I think I'm just going to do some things and hopefully this will make, no. You have to be totally convinced. This is kind of like, like I'll just give you one example. That suppose you, this is what happens to me. When I was like 4 or 5 years old, I found out that I was extremely allergic to tur dal. And very allergic. Even now, if I have a bowl of tur dal and there is no medical help for me, I can die, even now. And so when I was 4 or 5 years old, it was a great thing at that time how they discovered the allergy to it. So now, supposing I have to go someplace for eating dosa and sambar. Sambar is mostly on tur dal. I have some friends that make sambar for me with masoor dal. And that's the only dal that I'm highly allergic to. Everything else I'm okay with. But suppose I go to a place where they have some sambar. I remember when I was growing up, my mother would make South Indian food, even though we are from the north. What we used to make, my mom would make, idli and sambar and so on. But she could not give me any sambar. I'd have to just have some chutneys and so on. Even the smell of tur dal can really bother me. Unfortunately, my younger son, has inherited my allergies, not only to one dal, but many dals. And very unfortunately, our youngest granddaughter is also exhibiting signs of these allergies. Anyway, so my allergy to tur dal is such a way I have tivra vairagya towards tur dal. It's not like, this I can eat something, this is a little too fatty for me, but it's okay, I can do it. No. And similarly, our attitude towards the world, once we progress, becomes that really even going towards it and being enamored by it can give me problems. And I need to be very clear about how injurious my attitude towards the world can be. This is called Tivra Vairagya. So now the sword of Tivra Vairagya. The third one is Titiksha Vartma Yuktasya. So Vartma means a bodily armor. So, so people used to, in the old days, they would be wearing these clothes made out of metal, the metal netting. And there, you have seen pictures in the old days of, what is it called? The movie? Ivanhoe. Ivanhoe was the movie where the two fighters mounted on the horse and having these spears are moving towards it, and they're both wearing armored clothes, and they've got metal on their knees and head and so on. So they want to protect themselves against anything. And so this is what is called Vartma, and body armor. And what kind of Vartma? Titiksha. Titiksha means pot shots given to you in the form of some problems. So somebody does somebody insults you, somebody doesn't give you enough credit, all kinds of things, all bodily problems, even the tur dal allergy. So nowadays, my son always keeps an EpiPen with him. So this is that saying that it's very possible. This is what happened to us. We were gone to a wedding in Malaysia, and he didn't know that the Malaysians had used. He's very allergic to peanuts, so they had made something which they didn't say it was peanuts, but it had peanuts. And the guy almost he could have been in a hospital because the Malaysian doctors could not speak English. He had an EpiPen with him, and he immediately injected himself, and he suffered through it. The next couple of hours were bad, but then he survived. So this is called Titiksha Vartmana Yuktasya. Titiksha means the ability to withstand problems. It's called Titiksha. So he says, if a person has these three things, Arudasya Viveka Ashvam, Tivra Vairagyam Khadginaha, Titiksha Vartma Yuktasya Pratiyogina Drishyate. Okay, so this is the start. Now let's go into some depth. Okay. So here Swami Maheswaranji points out that we are living in the samsara. We are part of the Jagat. We know our experiences every day. We are living in the samsara. In order for me to acquire a knowledge of the self, which is same thing as the knowledge of Parameshwara, there's no difference. The knowledge of Paramatma, Parameshwara, Ishvara, Shiva is the same as acquiring the knowledge of my own self. Why? Because my self is Parameshwara's content. It is set up by Parameshwara, it is managed by Parameshwara, it is the form of Shiva. And so for me to gain an acquaintance with this means I have to conquer samsara. Or not I have to conquer samsara, the conquest of samsara equals the acquaintance with Parameshwara. This is the premise. Okay? So let's go forward with this, each step, one step at a time. So the question is, what does it mean? What does it mean that you conquer samsara? So we have to really be very careful about each of these words. Conquest of sankara, freedom from, you know. So Swami Maheshanji pointed out, okay, let me define it for you very specifically. The conquest of samsara is, let us define what is samsara. Samsara can be distilled into two words. Shoka moha rupa samsara. Now, if you look at, what is samsara? Samsara means living in the life and so on. I know I'm living in the life, but in terms of all of your instructions, as you are saying about Atma Vichara, what does it really mean? So, in order for us to further this inquiry, we have to reduce samsara into two factors. Shoka, moha. Shoka means problems, dukkha, not being well, either mentally or physically, some pain. And if you want to look at a more deeper version of shoka, it is sorrow. Depression. Depression. These days this has become a very modern word. That person is depressed, and there are medicines for depression. So what depression is not just casual dukkha, but such a long-lasting dukkha that you begin to have a sense of, you lose hope and depression. So these are variations, but basically shoka means unhappiness. Okay. So this is one factor of what samsara means to me. The other factor is moha. And moha and shoka go together. What is moha? Moha means inability to distinguish what is to be done and what is not to be done. We do things that should be for our own good, but we don't always pursue that. Typical case is food. We know that carbohydrates and rice and all of this is not good, but we say, maybe it'll be okay. Our forefathers have been eating it and so on. But forefathers were different, their diet was different, they were vegetarians and they had used to have, let's leave aside that. But somehow our logic is, it's okay, I can eat potatoes and fried things and so on. Wait, don't you want your own health to be good? Yeah, I want my health to be good. Then why are you eating this? Well, I'm hoping that this won't really affect me. This is called moha. You have no distinction between what is to be done, what is right for you. You are hurting yourself by your actions, your thoughts, and so on. And by being confused about what is what. This is called moha. So two things. One is shoka, and you can say that the shoka could be construed as an effect of moha. past moha, past vasanas. So then they give rise to, like for example, if uh, you have been negligent about eating sugar, then finally diabetes comes in to a point where it becomes irreversible. So that is kind of like shoka. But the moha is not knowing that sugar and salt are very harmful to our body. We must regulate the intake of it. Now, I'm just giving you some simple examples of it, but this is all, the life is full of these two factors. Okay? So, and so now our goal is to conquer. So when we say conquer the world, what it means is we must conquer shoka and moha. Okay? All right. So let's go step by step. There's a lot more to be done in depth. We may not be done today in this class, but we'll finish this whole thing in a package that will hopefully make a lot of sense to you. Okay. So now our acharyas say that normally we think of our enemies to be outside of us. In viewing the winning of the war against shoka and moha, another factor to keep in view is that we wrongly think that we need to conquer factors in the world. And this is what we are doing every day. Avoiding bad people, going after good people, avoiding bad areas to visit, external things. External things. Here the next step that the acharyas say is much more harmful to us is the internal shoka and moha. And so doing external things without paying attention to the internal shoka and moha is not going to really help very much. Swami Maheshananji points out that we think, this is interesting, a good example of something good, even that is not effective. That if I just do dhyanam, meditation, japa, yajna, charitable things, going to pilgrimages, all of that would help me. And it does to a certain extent. But if despite all of that, my internal shoka and moha are undisturbed, I have not done anything. This is an example of the external versus internal. Swamiji says that I have seen people over a long period of time of just being enamored of all these exercises, all of these activities of life and so on and so forth, when their minds and their behavior and their attitudes and so on are still the same. Here, one interesting thing to think about, I'm bringing in from some other lessons that Swami Maheshananji had given out. He says that, really speaking, people think that they live in places. They think they live in places. You can ask somebody, where do you live? And they'll say, oh, I'm in Fremont, California, and I live in a condominium. This is where people think I'm there, and and so on. But the fact of the matter is, you are actually living in the confines of your mind. So, for example, suppose you move from one area which was somewhat dilapidated to another area uh, which is well developed, safer. Um, the roads are better, the police and all of that. So you think you have now changed places, and you have, no doubt about it. There's no mystery about that. But if your attitude and your mind and your thinking about yourself and the world and so on does not change along with it, and it will change to a certain extent because you'll be less fearful about perhaps some theft in the area, in the old area, and the new areas might be safer. So that part is okay. But Swamiji says, if you really think about it, we are living in the ghosla, as they say in Hindi, the nest of your own mind. So the external places to live is not as important as the internal places to live. And by the way, you know this fact very well. So this is what is called Sukshma Sharira. So this is the attitude, the thinking, the subtle body, and so on. So we all have three components to our being as Jiva. One is the subtle body, one is the gross body, and the third one is the causal body, Karana Sharira, Maya Shakti, and so on. And so, if you give up this body, either voluntarily or forced to give it through some death or something like this, not voluntarily, but I mean you commit suicide, let's say, and say, I want to just, I've had it, I cannot live here anymore. I've got to just, I don't know if I'm going to live at all, but I do not want to live here. Interestingly enough, I don't know, I think the number of suicides every day must, we can Google this actually, must number tens of thousands in the world. 10,000, 20,000, I don't know, I have a feeling. 20,000 people commit suicide every day, just in today. Can you believe it? So these 10,000 people said, I'm not going to live here. I'm going to go someplace else. What our acharyas say, my dear person, can I tell you something? By changing your residence from this inhospitable world to what you think would be another hospitable world, or would be better world, is not going to change anything. And you should know why. Because we live in the nest of our Sukshma Sharira. And that Sukshma Sharira is you, is connected to you, and you're keeping it with you. By just committing suicide here, Sukshma Sharira is not touched by the suicidal act. It just travels with you. And so you will take birth as a baby, and as you grow up, you will have the same Sukshma Sharira, more or less. So therefore, what Viveka means is that external things are not nearly as important as internal things. He gave this example, it must have been at that time, of Richard Nixon, who was a US president. Swamiji says that if you really look at, the power of the US president and the Russian, anybody that has nuclear wars and nuclear weapons, atom bomb, hydrogen bomb, and all of these, how powerful these people are. And you would think that that should give them a certain sense of entitlement and power and control over the world. So he was giving this example about Richard Nixon, and he says, here's an example who reached the pinnacle of power in the world. I doubt if there is something more difficult than to become a president of the US. Oh my God. You all know that. How much effort it takes, how much money it takes, fundraising, how much begging, how much making friends of people that you don't like, how much support of the party, how much fighting, how many speeches. Oh my God. You would think, why do people do that? Because it is a pinnacle of power. I am the president. This is what happened to Trump. Trump was very strange because he didn't even want the presidency. He never thought that he would get it. He just thought that, this is fun, let me just do it, as long as it'll make me richer. Lo and behold, the guy elected him. Anyway, so Richard Nixon was a very powerful guy, and yet he could not control his inner demons. He lied and cheated and was caught and was shamed and kicked out. Why? Because he did not pay attention to his internal shoka and moha. So the conclusion of this whole exercise is that yes, samsara means shoka and moha. If you want to distill it to two factors. If the samsara word is too confusing to you and so on, just give me something simple. Okay? Shoka and moha, number one. Number two, shoka and moha is an internal twin factors, not the external ones. Similarly, for example, we talked about titiksha as the vartma, as the armor. Again, you can build bunkers to hide atomic bombs. Like, for example, in Russia, I understand that they have an entire city underground where the government can function in case there is a nuclear war. We can do all of that. But if one does not have the capacity to withstand criticism and disappointments, there are problems. And even the current case where they're trying to subjugate Ukraine, they might be able to do it in the short term. For longer term, they would lose the loyalty of everybody. This will be what is called a pyrrhic, I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right. It is a useless victory. I was reading an article, in fact, in the Wall Street Journal just a couple of days ago. I've been reading quite a bit of articles about the history of this invasion and so on. And by the way, just digressing it for a minute, very good article in the Wall Street Journal, which was in the form of an interview by a very famous historian. Well, I never heard of him, but he's supposed to be very good, especially about these these relationships between Russia and the European Union and the US and so on. So he was interviewed by this guy that I've read. It's called Tunku Varadarajan. Now you may have seen his articles. He's a very smart guy, young guy. So he interviewed this person. And he came up with two observations. And one of the observations I think I shared with, I knew ahead of time. The second one surprised me. The one that I knew was that this is a mistake by the West. We could have completely avoided all the bloodshed if the West had not done so many bad things to Russia and to Ukraine. Like saying, no, we'll admit you to NATO. You can't do that. It's like taking Texas and Arizona away from US and saying, we're going to make you into a Soviet state. Not possible. This is mistake number one. The second mistake, which was a surprise to me, is that the Russians are going to fail eventually, and it will enfeeble their whole country. They had no idea the amount of reaction in the whole world. They misunderstood it. Putin in particular. So he says this is not going to end well for anyone. So anyway, those are the things. So if you make all these bunkers and so on and so forth, that is nothing compared to a statesman who looks for criticism and says, okay, I understand, I was a mistake, I won't do this again, let's change this. And a series of articles all said that the Russians are a very great people, but they have been let down by a series of incompetent, non-thinking leaders of their own country, starting with Lenin, Stalin, all of these people. Idiotic ideas about communism and so on and so forth. And Putin is just one of those. So it's really sorry for the people. So if you don't have the tiksha to chart the right course, anyway, all of this is just on this internal versus external argument that I was doing. Okay, let us move forward. We have not even touched on the main things yet. I'm just building up to the what the main topic of today is, and that is there is one thing that does not allow me to mount the horse of Viveka. So we're going to go into this in some depth. Please be with me, follow this argument, and think about it again and again later on also. This is not just a trivial thing. So we looked about again in revising, we said that to conquer samsara is to know, get an acquaintance with Parameshwara, with God, and in order to get that, we have to look upon the conquest of samsara, which is reduced to two factors, shoka and moha. And in order for us to confront shoka and moha, we have to think about not just the external enemy in the form of shoka and moha, but internal shoka and moha, which is with me all the time, and I'm oblivious of it. I'm ignoring. It's somebody who's eating me from inside, but I don't realize it, and I am barking at the wrong tree, which is dealing with things outside my life, outside myself. So the internal shoka and moha, and so is important. And riding the horse of viveka. So now we can go, how do we conquer shoka and moha? And we've already seen the three factors. Riding the horse, mounting the horse of viveka, this is number one. Okay, so how come what do you mean by mounting the horse of viveka? Mounting the horse means having the skill to do viveka. Mounting a tall horse which is moving is not easy. I have to develop a skill of doing viveka. Okay, all right, let's go forward. So how do I develop the skills to do viveka? I need to understand what is preventing me from mounting the horse of viveka. What is preventing me from becoming a viveki? So viveki means a wise, discriminative person that can distinguish truth from untruth, good from bad, right from wrong. This is viveka. Okay. Then we should see there is one factor that more than anything else is preventing me from doing this viveka. And that is Ahankara. Ahankara. This we must understand very well because this is the crux of the whole thing. So the Ahankara, as the word goes, means, so normally it is translated as ego. You know, you say that person has such a big ego. He thinks so highly of himself. And he doesn't understand he's not as great as he thinks he is. Ego. He's got a big ego. This is their understanding of Ahamkara. But the word Ahamkara is a technical word. Ego is a popular understanding, easily understood. You know, if you meet some people, you can say there's a person who is very self-evasive, effacing, one who is very humble. And then you see another person who has this ego. We all have, I can see some friends here. There's a friend of mine who was I hope you don't know who I mean. I think you won't. He's been a doctor friend for a long time. And he was working in some government office in the medical field, and he got friendly with the medical doctor for a president. I think it was Reagan. He was Reagan's doctor. So he became friendly with this doctor who was Reagan's doctor. It is so interesting. He is so proud of the fact that he was invited to enter the White House by his friend. He never met Reagan, but he was in some room where they had some medical things and so on. And that he went there and so on. So every time we meet him, somehow the conversation goes back to when I was in White House. This is the memory he wants to. He has a very big ego that I was a big guy. He must have been an important doctor, I don't know. But So you can say the distinction between a self-effacing person and an egotistical person. This is our understanding of the word Ahankara, right? In Vedantic sense, the Ahankara is a technical word with different meanings. So let's understand what that is. Ahankara is not a super ego as we understand it. It is a sense of I-ness that each one of us has. This is me. Well, how do you define the me and so on? Hey, it's very, I don't have to define it. You as a person, you and I as a person, our body, our ethnicity, our age, our personality. This is me. This is me. And this meanness, not meanness, but meanness, I-ness, is served by certain faculties that support me, like my buddhi, my mind. Not only my mental capacity, but my ability to see truth from non-truth. Wisdom, buddhi. You know buddhi. So there are 4 kinds of mental activities. And in this whole thing, the Ahankara gets kind of like lost in the shuffle. So those are, as you know, Manaha, Buddhi, Ahamkara, and Chittam. Chittam means memory. Ahankara is minus. Mind means just the ability to think. And wisdom is represented by Buddhi. So here in this analysis, as you see, actually when you read, see, this is one of the things about learning Vedanta, that sometimes I remember when I first there was a lesson course by Swami Chinmayanand, and there we were introduced to the 5 indriyas and 5 karma indriyas, then the pancha pranaha, and then the fourfold mind. Fourfold mind there is manaha, buddhi, ahamkara, and chittam. So this we thought, okay, now we know these are 19 altogether. 5 jnana indriyas, 5 karma indriyas, 5 pranas, and the fourfold mind. And even now we see that at various places, this kind of enumeration of the sukshma sharira. But this is my point is this. In the study of Vedanta, as you study deeper and deeper, some of the factors are more important than others. So it is not just a counting of how many things you have in your sukshma sharira. They have varying effects on me, various ability to impede my progress, and which ones are more important needs to be paid attention to. So in this case, Ahankara. Ahankara means, again, now to reiterate, now that I've given you the background on ego and so on, just simply means me. The I thought is called Ahankara. Aham karoti iti ahamkara. The aham vritti, described variously. Aham vritti, me. Ahankara is responsible for preventing my viveka, which is the door that leads into the conquest of shoka and moha. This has to be understood. How? In many ways, this I-ness, this my-ness is my-ness, my-ness is just a offshoot of I-ness, as you know. So part of the I-ness is this is my son, this is my daughter, this is my granddaughter, mine, this is my house, this is my car, this is my wife, this is my spouse. That's all part of the I-ness, surrounding the I-ness. But the I-ness is the one. Okay, so this is one thing. Then the other thing is, as I mentioned before, this I-ness is the main person that has the support of certain supporting roles. So in that sense, what I was saying about that in Vedanta, not all 14 factors are useful for me to understand. Let's take out two factors here for our analysis. One is Ahankara and the other one is Buddhi. So the Ahankara is the main culprit, as we will see. We haven't even begun to really articulate this whole thing. It's a very, very nice story that we have that I hope I can do this before we leave. And the application of that story to my life, which specifically points out the obstacles that Ahankara gives, we'll have to wait for next class. Because it's already 9 o'clock. There's no way I have so much more material just on this whole topic. All right. So the main culprit that prevents me from mounting the horse of Viveka is Ahankara. So, in fact, I don't think I can even go, well, maybe I'll go to the story, I don't know, we'll see, let's see. So the next point. It turns out that the Ahankara has been given to me by Parameshwara to serve me. As a springboard towards freedom. There's so much to talk about this whole thing. It's beautiful, just absolutely marvelous explanations all along. So just look at it this way, that Ishvara, in expressing himself as me, has provided me with a springboard which is I, and the I-ness can either enslave me or free me. So in that sense, the I-ness, if it's an entity, and it is an entity, you see, it's an entity. It's an entity. For my whole life I have some I-ness. This is me. Various forms, young me, old me, sick me, healthy me, all of that, but me. So this is an entity. This entity is supposed to serve me, is supposed to serve the real I. This is just a helping entity for me to discover who I really am. But it's an important entity. In fact, on the other hand, this entity can be called a thief. that is robbing my freedom. Is a thief. So here Swami Meshananji pointed out that there are various kinds of thieves that you have. One kind of thief, which is very relevant in this particular case, one kind of thief is the one who robs you by putting you to sleep, by giving you something to drink that robs your ability to know, to awaken yourself. I was just reading this and I came across this very tragic. I was driving the other day picking up my granddaughter from her practice. I don't really listen to the radio very much except for some sports radio and so on. But on this one I was reading, listening to NPR, and this lady, Terry Gross, wonderful, she has so many, I forget the name of the show, but anyway, she was interviewing an African American author who has written a book on Bill Crosby. And it's a very, very tragic story, really. And this is an African American. He's a artist. I think he's a playwright in the film industry, and I don't remember any of the names. But he says that when Bill Crosby became popular as a comedian, he really was a great example for the African Americans to be treated correctly, and the entire Hollywood really gave them better jobs because of Bill Crosby, and everybody used to worship Bill. What a great guy he is. What a wonderful. And we all, I've been watching Bill Crosby for a long time. You know the tragic story. Bill Crosby is one of the worst serial rapists ever to live. It's a very, and this guy, this African American author, was saying that it shattered my life. And for the longest period, I thought this was concocted. How can this wonderful sounding grandfatherly guy can do such heinous acts? But he says, I decided I'm going to look into that. And then he started to do the research. And he talked to all these ladies who were raped. And not one, two, but literally hundreds of them. And what came out was such a rascal. And his modus operandi, and are you ready for this, is the same as our Ahankara. Bill Crosby. You can read about this. You can get all the facts. I'm not giving you something which is fiction. Bill Crosby's modus operandi which is totally reliable. He would get to know a young woman who's very attractive and should be very young, almost like high teenager or 18, 19. And because of his stature, he would invite them for a drink. Except in their drink, he would put some kind of a drug so that they become sleepy. And then he would violate their sexuality. And they would wake up the next morning knowing where was I, what happened. without any clothes. And he did this not once, but without any compunction, hundreds of times. So Swami Maheshanji, of course, he didn't know about all this, but he says that there are types of thieves. And there is one type of thief who actually befriends you. So this is an important thing for us to see. This is a type of thief that befriends you and puts you to sleep so that you don't find out the truth about who they are. And so I was, interestingly enough, if you look at the third Anuvaka of Sri Rudram, do you ever study, and I think we will do that in our next course. We're going to do Sri Rudram, and we're going to discuss this in detail. But just on this point here alone, the third Anuvaka of Sri Rudram goes like this. Namasahamanaya nivyadina avyadini nam pataye namo namo kakubhaya nishangine stena nam pataye namo namo nishangina ishudimate taskara nam pataye namo 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 vanchate parivanchate stayunam pataye namo namo nicherave Paricharaya Ranyana Pataye Namo Namasrika Vibhyo Jigagum Satpyo Mushnatam Pataye Namo Namo Simatpyo Naktancharafyaf Prakrintana. I won't read the whole thing, but this is, if you look at the meaning of this, many of you already know this, it's a description of the various kinds of people that rob us. Some rob us forcefully, some rob us while we are not home, some kill us, take our properties, and some rob us by putting us to sleep. I forget which one it is. Vanchate, parivanchate maybe. I don't know. I read this some time ago, but I can't remember. Ahankara and his support buddhi are that kind of a thief. And it tells the buddhi, listen, I hope you are supporting me, because don't wake this guy up. Because while he's asleep and we are having fun in our life, we will describe all this, all the fun and so on and so forth. It will be interesting for us to see in the next week. You enjoy yourself, and why do you want to give up? This guy wakes up, our worldly enjoyment will go. We will disappear. You will disappear. I will disappear. You don't want that to happen, do you? No, absolutely not. So just fake it. Just say, yes, I'm studying Vedanta and one of these days I'll be okay and so on and so forth. It's just fake. That just tells you, okay, I'm not ready to wake up yet. Keep sleeping. But let me enjoy myself. And you're robbing the person in the meantime. There's a big story coming up that will really just, and I think I was thinking that at least I will tell you the story today, but it looks like I'm running out of time, so it might be better if we do the second version of this next week, where we give you the story, phenomenal story, and then we start to look at the applicability of that in our life to see the relationship on how the various parts of the story have become relevant to us, so that we become convinced about how my progress is being impeded by my Ahankara. Where is it hurting me? Until I'm clear about it, I am not going to give up my Ahamkara. This is all that I got. This is me. Leave me alone. Leave me with my problems. I'll try to solve it. But if you tell me that I have to commit suicide in order to reach Paramatma, which is really what it amounts to, it seems like it, which is not true, I am not willing to do that. So this is where I'll make a note of it, that we will start with from this point on in our next class. We could go on a little bit more, but I think we'll have to go into the lengthy story, and we will probably wait until next class for us to do that. Okay, so with that I close the class and with a prayer, and let's see if there are any questions that you have. Om Asato Ma Satkamaya Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amritam Gamaya. Om Purnamadav Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Harihi Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om. Okay, good. Good to see you all. I don't see any questions. I'll wait for a little while to see if you had any observations or suggestions or questions. I don't see any. So with that, I take your leave, and I will see you next week. Hari Om.